Hello, my friends, and welcome to an incredibly special edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter. In the book of my life, there is a soundtrack. And the majority of the songs within that soundtrack were penned by and sung by David Moore of Split, Lip and Chamberlain. Beginning in the early 90s as a metallic-tinged post-hardcore band, Chamberlain grew by leaps and bounds with each release. They'd become this fabulous monster that with each record had become more and more heartfelt, more and more in line with what it was to be a singer, a songwriter, a lover, a musician. Tonight I share with you a sincere reaching out from one soul to another about the things that make our lives move forward, the things that make our hearts beat in time with one another's. It is my pleasure and honor to give to you David Moore of Split, Lip and Chamberlain on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. David.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, sir?
I'm good, my man. How you doing?
I couldn't be better.
Yeah.
God, it's great to see you. I know you'll never remember this in a million years, but you and I have met actually about 4 times.
Yeah, you look. I recognize your face for sure.
You and I had about a half-hour conversation. You guys were playing a festival in Scranton, Pennsylvania, my hometown. Mineral had played, a few other bands, and I had ducked into a back hallway of the Scranton Cultural Center. And you saw me smoking a Camel Wide, and you looked over and you said, "Listen, man, can I have one of those?" I said, "Absolutely." And I said, "While I have your ear, listen." And I started to extol the virtues of The Moon, My Saddle, and what that album had really meant to me at that time period, because I'd been going through a lot of, early 20-something heartbreak.
Yeah.
And it really, like all of your albums, like from Split Lip on up, resonated with me. The Moon, My Saddle, especially, just it encapsulated an era of my lifetime.
That's awesome.
And we started digging into the works of Dylan Thomas and stuff, and then we got finished smoking, and you were, "All right, I'm gonna go play." And that was it. But it was something that I kind of carried with me for the rest of my life. Something, David Moore is really a great guy.
So where are you living now?
I'm still in the Scranton area. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, staying close to mom, as men often do.
Yeah. Me too.
There's nothing better, really, honestly. A lot of people kind of get it in their heads that they have to kind of fly the coop, as it were. But I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I'm an Irish Catholic. I stay close to mom. Yeah.
Oldest of 6. Wow.
Yes, sir.
I'm 4th of 5, so we're on the other end of the spectrum. But yeah.
Yeah.
So are you close with all your siblings? Everybody close in town or spread out or what?
We are legitimately within 15 minutes of one another.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's the best. Good.
It's one of those things that most people I don't think get to enjoy. And I can sometimes take it for granted, as a lot of people do, but I also take advantage as much as possible. We all coalesce as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, good. So you have kids?
Yes. I have a 21-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, 45 years old, and I got a 3-year-old running around.
Wow. Good for you. Good
Yeah.
for you.
You have children, do you not?
I do. Well, actually, I've got one left because my second son, well, my oldest is 20. My Lucas just is 20. Jesse just turned 18 5 days ago. So they're both technically not children anymore. And then Maggie, my daughter, is it will be 16 in September. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you kind of knocked it all out like in succession really quickly.
Yeah. 2 years apart, each of them. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
See, my siblings and I were all with the longest stretch between siblings is about 14 months. We're all kind of Irish twins.
Yeah, right. That's awesome.
My children, on the other hand, are 18 years apart.
That's amazing.
I know. I'm such a fortunate soul. I kind of thank God every day for my blessings, because not a lot of guys in my age group kind of get to start over again. And it's kind of a beautiful thing,
Yeah, I've thought about that actually. Like, man, if I had when you're younger and you have kids, it's amazing. But
Sure.
I've thought about, like, man, because Adam and Curtis, both in the band, sort of started the family life later. They had kids in their 40s, and it's just made me think about, man, I'd be like really good at this. I'm way better at it in my 40s than I was in my 20s. Yeah.
I am so much better at being a dad and being patient and present and reveling in the moment.
Yeah.
But I'm quite sure your children are more than happy with the way you raised them.
Yeah, no, we had a good time for sure.
So bearing all that in mind, like you have, the family with the children getting older and all of that, you did Split Lip, you did Chamberlain, then you did this phenomenal solo record, and then
thank you for that.
Listen, man, I like Joshua Jericho. I remember the first time I heard that song and I heard that line, and it floored me, because I'm one of those weirdos. I'm still Catholic.
Yeah.
And I still have my belief system. And there's something about that illusion that, it's have that bravery in the face of insurmountable.
Yep.
The insurmountable. It felt very definitive and very steadfast in its belief,
Yeah. Well, I always, here's the thing, right? And you'll know this probably better than anybody, being Irish Catholic, but like those symbols and those stories stay with you in a way that, if you don't grow up in a religious family, it's hard to explain it. But like, and you go through periods where you kick against it and you're like, this isn't for me and whatever. But it's something in your veins that, and you recognize that, like, there's a power to those stories that transcends a lot of other stuff in the world. And the older I've gotten, the more I've relied on those, not from the same vantage point as my parents and their generation, not as like, in a different way, right? In my own way. But that stuff stays with you and it's powerful. And there's a reason those stories have been around for, thousands of years, because they speak to really basic core fundamentals of the human experience. Like you said, like, fighting against, a dominant power and being able to blow the walls down with, a trumpet. Like, those are just cool images that don't leave you. You know what I mean? They don't leave you. And that's probably one of my favorite songs. So I appreciate that.
That's absolutely my favorite song on that record. I love every song on that record, but that one, Jericho, just it moves me in a very, very intrinsic way. It's almost ubiquitous, as if that song had existed before it existed.
Yeah,
me. You know,
well, it was one of those songs. Yeah, when you'll hear songwriters talk about those kinds of songs that just kind of come down, and it was that way. Like I could probably count on one hand how many songs were like that, but that was one of those ones that was just like,
well, I could count about at least a dozen to 18 Chamberlain songs and Split Lip songs that do that for me. And I could draw a direct parallel to Go Down Believin' to Jericho. I mean, there's just something about that. It's not a similar theme that they thread together very nicely. And it's also that faith in the face of the insurmountable.
Yep.
You're always kicking against the pricks, as Nick Cave would say.
Yeah.
And it feels very lived in and very real.
Yeah.
Like nothing you've written lyrically. And, I have an English degree. This is my part and parcel. This is my life's blood. It feels very lived in, but also, off the cuff. You're not forcing any syllable. It all happens very organically.
Right. Well, that's the thing about religion and faith and that whole institution is people think it's a really dominant, and certainly it has been. But at the end of the day, it's a reaching. It's an attempt to find, a deeper experience, a deeper truth, a deeper meaning, which is universal. Everybody's doing that, right?
Yeah.
And there's, of course, been a lot of terrible things done in the name of religion. But if you scale all that back and you just read the stories and you walk through that, what is it? Just a journey of trying to find faith and purpose and meaning. I mean, that's what all great literature, all great songs, or anything else is all about, right? Just trying to find a purpose and a transcendent meaning behind all the mundane, everyday stuff, right?
Yeah.
So,
and you could put whatever face you want on it, really, because religion has quite honestly done some very terrible things to this country, specifically, even very recently. But it's not about being religious. It's about having faith in anything that is virtuous.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, I was just having this conversation with my son the other day, and I've always been drawn to, whether it was writers in the Bible, whether it was Paul in the epistles, or whether it was Bob Dylan or whoever. I've always been drawn to people who stood for something and not stood against something. Like, to me, the value and the purpose is about like standing for something. There's been plenty of movements and ideologies that have stood against, but I've just always, wherever somebody's standing for something, whether it's in the Bible or it's in a song or it's in a book, that's what I've always been drawn to. Like, stand up for something, don't stand against. And me personally, that's where I derive my energy from as a writer.
And that's basically, like you just explained, hardcore versus first wave punk.
Yeah, exactly.
As hardcore kids, we stood for something. We had, animal rights. We had, anti governmental institutions, like anti-drug abuse, whatever it was, but we were standing for something, not just flying in the face of things for the sake of it.
Right. Yeah. Not just being counter. It's the difference between, for me, idealism and ideology, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'll fight for idealism all day, but ideology where you're defining yourself because you don't want to be this or you don't want to be that, it just never made a whole lot of sense to me. You know what I mean?
No, you're buying into someone else's movement. It's not really personal at that point. You're just joining a club, and I was never much of a joiner myself.
Yeah, agreed.
You know?
Yeah, agreed. Yep.
But taking us into the red weather of it all, I mean, every record you guys have ever done together, there's common threads in the songwriting, but it's always very different. Every album's a very different experience, and I think Red Weather is very much in that vein, and it kind of didn't try to retread the past at all. You guys were trying to translate who you are right now through the clothing that is Chamberlain.
Yeah.
But you know, and the songwriting, it's all there, but it doesn't sound like, you know, any of the other records. It's its own being.
Yeah.
What was that like trying to kind of step back into that entity?
Well, we all had sort of a half spoken, half unspoken agreement, right? That, you know, first of all, the road that led us back together and start playing again and recording and was very organic, which was great. Like, you know, we played this book release show, and then we played this reunion show, and then it just kind of snowballed. And then before we knew it, we were like, man, we could make another record. But we all had sort of this agreement that if it was to retread where things have been, because there's a lot of that going around, right? There's a lot of bands that are doing that, and nothing against them at all. But I was probably the most adamant about, like, if this is about nostalgia or recapturing something that's was there once and now it isn't, like, I just, you know, we all have too much going on with family and kids, and I just didn't want to do it. So the great thing about this unit of people, I think, in this band is that we've had a really good compass about a self-awareness about, you know, are we doing this for the right reasons? And are we doing it because we have something to say? Or are we just doing it because we want to try and recapture some, you know, glory day when we were all, you know, at our peak? And nobody wanted that. None of us wanted that. And, you know, luckily, when we got in the room and started writing, the old template didn't fit anyway. So it wasn't like we were trying to, you know, recreate what happened on the Moon My Saddle or on Fate's Got a Driver. We knew we had a new territory we wanted to explore, and that's kind of what happened. I mean, I'd gone through a lot personally, and so there was a lot to say lyrically, and everybody else had evolved as musicians, and it never once felt like we were retreading old ground, or, you know, trying to harvest long since past fields. You know what I mean? It was, we knew we were headed in a, you know, a new direction, and I don't think we ever would have done it if we wouldn't have the energy to do it if we didn't think we were going into a new space. So that's what Red Weather was, I think, for all of us to varying degrees. Yeah.
And it shows. I mean, the proof is definitely in the pudding with this, because it's got that something that and I used the word ubiquitous already once, but I'll use it again, because there is something kind of timeless about the musicianship, about the lyricism. It's definitely you guys, but it's not Fate's Got a Driver. It's not Exit 263. It's just not. It's not those records. This is its own thing, as all of those records were too. So that's, you guys are kind of blessed, I think, in that way, that you never ever kind of retread.
No, I think that might be our best quality, really. And that it's, you know, that it happens sort of organically. Like, we just never want to go where we've already been. Particularly with Red Weather, with all this time that's passed and all of us having our own families and lives, like, we knew, like, we're not going to spend hours upon hours recording and writing and getting together if we're not doing something that, at the end of the day makes us feel like we're expanding ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And luckily we all had that same sentiment. None of us were trying to go backwards. We all wanted to go into a new space. So, and I think we did. I don't think there's a whole lot that you can look at on Red Weather that, obviously there's seminal elements of our band and melodic elements and lyrical elements that still harken back to where we were, but it definitely expands out to a different space, I think, which is what we all aimed for.
It's blood on the tracks versus blonde on blonde to me.
Oh, you're speaking my language.
Yeah, well, I grew up on Bob Dylan. That was like the first voice that made any sort of sense to me outside of Mark Bolan and T-Rex.
Yeah,
a very small child was Bob Dylan.
Yeah,
and it started with Revisited and kind of went from there. I took the journey in chronology because that's the way my father had his records laid out. So
yeah,
I'd pull them out and do that in chronology. But that's legitimately the difference to me.
Yeah.
And I can tell that's sort of a hallmark too for you.
Yeah, for sure. And Dylan's he's my pinnacle for sure. And I think, I would never obviously draw any comparisons whatsoever, but there is that sense of like, if you've already been there, and it's not even a conscious thing. It's just like, show me something new. Like, let's go somewhere different. Like, because otherwise you're spinning your wheels and you're, resting on your laurels and you're pulling out your own tricks. And, we have a running joke in the band of like, when David doesn't know what to write about, he writes about stars. And the guys would always kind of pull me out. And I'll be like, all right, yeah, thanks for keeping me honest. You're right. Like, don't stay in a rut, go somewhere else. And you just gotta, for me, it doesn't make sense any other way. Like, why do it, right? If I'm not pushing myself into some new space, like, it just, I don't know, just doesn't make sense to me, right?
No, especially like from a musician standpoint, like I could only construe boredom from that, like I'm going to do this again. I'm going to write this kind of punk record or this record or that record again and again and again.
Yeah.
And I am a musician and I have retread myself many times and it's always a disappointment.
Yeah.
And I'm never happy with the result. Therefore, if you don't become a sort of chameleon unto yourself, you're robbing yourself of the joy and the jubilation of discovery.
Right. Which is really the only reason any of us got into this to begin with. I think, and it may be easy to say because we never had any real big success. I can't imagine if you're wildly famous and you've written some hugely, popular songs. I'm sure the temptation to stay in that space, right, is huge. Like we've been able to be pretty nimble because in the grand scheme of things, we never had the pressure of major labels and any of that stuff. But, to your point about Dylan, like he was on Columbia Records his entire career, still is. And he never, he just never wanted to go backwards. And I've always admired that. Even, sometimes it's like feeling your way and you're like, I don't even know if this makes sense or is good or of value. And sometimes like with the Moon My Saddle, it takes years before, people or, listeners want to hear it and think it's worthwhile. But yeah, to me, it's always been about the process and about, pushing yourself out of stagnancy. And, that's what we try to do on Red Weather.
It blows my mind the way everything kind of happened with the Moon My Saddle too, because to me, that was pretty much the pinnacle record that came out that year. And that you're talking about being up against like Jimmy Eat World, Clarity came out around that time, and there were a lot of really important records that happened, but that's the one. And in my circle of friends, that's the one. That's the record that in that year, at that time period, kind of, and it really did. It kind of captured a zeitgeist we didn't realize was happening, because you guys set a tone that a lot of other musicians kind of stole from you.
Yeah. 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 You know, I think I love that you said you and, you know, the circle you're in really gravitated towards it. But I think to say, I mean, that record was destroyed in a lot of ways, you know, when it came out that year. It was not particularly well received by most, at least publications and punk rock, you know, magazines and all of that.
I wrote a great review of it in the fanzine I wrote for at the time.
Yeah?
Yes, I did.
You were the one. Hold on, I'm going to turn this light on. It's getting dark.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, you know,
well, think about it though, David. I mean, like Fate's Got a Driver was a massive record for so many people. It has the distinction in my life of being the album I have purchased more than any other album.
Is that right?
Yes, I have the split lip version of it on clear vinyl. Then I have another repress of it on Doghouse. Then I have another repress of it on Doghouse. Then when before this most recent anniversary edition came out, I bought the other anniversary edition when it came out, when that and The Moon My Saddle got reissued on, I forget the label that wasn't Doghouse that put it out. And then like I think I own on vinyl alone about 8 copies of that record.
Wow.
I have and Japanese like CD versions with extra tracks. Like I was just,
yeah,
you know, and I love that album, but The Moon My Saddle to me was it was the logical next step, but it was also like a reinvention.
Yeah.
You know, and then you get the singles that surrounded it, like right before, like with Go Down Believe In, and it was a whole era that I can't believe anybody had any misgivings about, but I think it was because you guys kind of embraced, you know, the Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen of it all. You stopped being just like an indie rock band or a hardcore band. And, you know, you guys in Old Pike, who were another phenomenal band, did your own damn thing. And people couldn't handle that. Like you had a kowtow to your listeners or something, which is completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of bravery, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, yeah, either bravery or bravado. I don't know what it was, but you know, I think there's that shedding of your skin, right? It's like, again, this seems to be the theme of our conversation, but you know, back in those days, you would go on these small circuits of shows, right? These punk rock shows. And, you know, when we were young and 16, 17, 15, we'd go and, for me anyway, you'd start showing up at shows and you'd be like, oh, everybody's dressed like I am. Everybody's wearing the same shirt. And something in me wanted to, I don't know. I was like, oh, I love these people and I love this scene, but I always wanted some other space, some other landscape. Like, you know, I could only get so comfortable for so long before I wanted to venture off in some other direction. To the extent that, you know, even inside the band, there were conflicts, there were, you know, long conversations and difficult conversations about where are we going, what are we doing. You know, we probably pivoted in the wrong direction at the worst time, you know, right after Nirvana hits and like all of a sudden this stuff is like flying off the shelves. We go and make a record that, you know, kind of flies in the face of that. And we probably would have had a much better, or at least more economically viable path had we stayed where we were, but we just didn't think that way. I mean, in your early 20s, you're just like, no, this is the song I want to write. And so I don't know.
Even if you think about it, though, like with The Moon My Saddle, you really started to sing in your own register too. It's not like your vocals were bad before; they were fantastic. But you weren't forcing anything on that album. There wasn't one iota of putting on airs at all.
Yeah,
you were singing, you weren't trying to reach out of your register. You were perfectly in your pocket, and it was so obvious because it was so flawless. Every delivery just had a virtuosity to it, like vocally, musically. Like the drumming is absolutely ungodly beautiful.
Yeah.
Totally. It just hit in all of the right ways. And I think Red Weather kind of did that too.
Yeah.
You hear Calling All Cars, and it's funny, my son and I are in the Calling All Cars.
I know. I know that. I know that. I recognize that.
I'm picking him up and he kisses me on the lips.
Yeah,
it wasn't even rehearsed. He just grabbed me and kissed me. It was hilarious. But there's something that it doesn't sound like that record, but it has that same organic, very natural, very real quality to it.
Yeah.
Lyrically, though, there's a real yearning in that song.
Yeah,
that is more palpable than any yearning, and there's a lot of yearning on your other records, but this one, it felt so immediate and real to me.
Oh, it's interesting you say that. Yeah. I went through we talked about being, children of a large family, and we were always exceptionally close. And long story short, but there were things that created divisions and broke apart some of those long-standing threads that bound us all together, right, as siblings and as a family. And that's kind of where that song originated from. So I'm not surprised that you hear that sort of yearning and the sort of wanting for something that was there before.
Yeah, because it felt like a loss of innocence almost. And I completely, like, my father had recently passed when it came out, and I was really just going over everything. And he was a Vietnam vet. He had a lot of demons. So it's like, and you're like, I'm afraid of my father. Yes, I am. I loved him, but I was terrified of him.
What's crazy about that line? When did you lose your father, if you don't mind me asking?
28, right before I got married, 2018.
Okay. So my father passed last year.
No, I'm sorry, man.
Actually, yeah, me too. But anyway, I bring that up because, to your point, like, he had gone through sort of just dementia and started to, break down and mentally. And I'd never in my life been afraid of my dad. And I wrote that line, and I remember second guessing it. Like, I don't know if I want to, put this in this song, because it was only at the very end where I felt that way, because there was so much conflict and, but yeah, there was this reversal, and this man I had known my whole life, at the very end, as he's facing, right, his own mortality and trying to come to terms with that. And I still, to be totally transparent, I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, that might be the line in the whole record that I most sort of regret or want to skip over when I hear it, just because it reminds me of that whole time frame with my dad. But it's hard, right? It's hard, as you know.
Somehow you tell yourself, like a rain cloud, I'm back again. And as you pull up to your house,
But the beauty of that is people get to own that. You know, as we do, we shoot lyrics through the prism of our own life experience.
Exactly.
And we tailor it to our own personalities. So whatever that may mean to any vast number of people, they get to own that. They get to internalize that and have that be their own armor for whatever. So although it may not fully be what you'd meant, it's still kind of perfect because it still gets to be owned by everyone else as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. I agree. Totally agree.
I think that's kind of what Dylan did for us too, you know. Hard Rain's Gonna Fall meant something to him that it meant something vastly dissimilar to me, but it's always about pain. It's always about, you know, comeuppance. Yeah. And that's universal.
And redemption, right? Like,
yeah.
To me, it's about revelation and, you know, walking through the muck and the mire and then finding, you know, in the attempt to articulate the loss or the grief or the pain or the whatever it is, you create something that, to your point, reaches out and threads you or connects you to others that have experienced those same things. And if you're going to make, you know, if there's any good to come out of the loss of a dad or, you know, the breaking up of a family that's been so close, and, you know, it's the knowledge that other people have been through it and can commune with you in those, you know, moments and in those feelings of loss and grief, and make something worthwhile of it, right? At the end of the day.
That's fellowship. That's true fellowship.
Yeah.
You know, it's what people go to church for. That's what people join clubs for.
Yeah.
Sometimes all it takes is just a good record.
Yeah.
And allowing it to envelop you. I don't know if people do that anymore. If they don't, that's a shame. We're of the generation where we listened to albums front to back. We experienced these things. I don't know if the younger generation really does. I doubt it, but I kind of wish they would, because there's something to be said about experiencing the world through the lens of another human psyche.
Yeah. And, you know, at the end of the day, there's a lot of suffering wrapped up in existence, right? And that's unavoidable. It's not something you can circumvent. You can try and, you know, parlay it as long as you want, or kick the can down the road as long as you, but it'll catch up with you. And I think turning that into something, however momentary, however, you know, fleeting or brief, I mean, what else are you going to do with it, right? Like, what else are you going to do with that pain and that, you know, struggle, besides turn it into something that might, you know, help you through it, but even more, you know, mysteriously and beautifully help somebody else who's listening to it through it. So,
well, it's a beacon, really. Yeah. If you have the gift of articulating your own agony and making something beautiful out of it, it becomes a prayer. It becomes a beacon.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
There's something gorgeous about that not many people, I guess, get to experience, making art of their misery, as it were.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing, and I think, although there's that's an example of it on Red Weather. I think Red Weather is also a very celebratory record.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
In its way, it really does. It feels like triumph.
Oh, I love that.
It really does. Like it like a shedding of skin. You've sloughed something off, and this is happening now. This is the moment we're enjoying, and it's very mature.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I could say a million things about that, but having written it in the period of my life when I did, just hearing you say that makes sense. I think it was half trying to fight against everything I was losing, and half trying to make myself believe like I had triumphed. But I'm glad that the the overarching sort of tone or feel of it is one of coming out on the other end of something exceptionally difficult and being in a better space as a result of it, because I think that's what I was certainly aiming for.
And that flies in the face of the title. You hear red weather, you're thinking, okay, this is a storm at sea, this is the oncoming doom and gloom, but then you put it on and it's anything but that. That there's a lilt to it that feels very triumphant, very joyous in its journey throughout.
Well, I loved the title because there's the old sailor's adage, right? Red skies at night, sailors delight. Red skies in the morning, sailors take warning, or something like that.
That's it.
It was originally for shepherds, but then it became something that they said at sea. And so I was sort of obsessed with this idea of like, well, it's all your vantage point, right? At night, a red sky means one thing. In the morning, it means a totally different thing. And I think that's kind of the essence of the lyrics and the songs of like, well, you can, right? Because you can make a narrative of any situation in your life, and you can go this way, you can go that way. You get to kind of decide what the narrative is going to be, right? And you're in that way, you're sort of the captain of your own ship. So it's all about perspective. It's all about holding on to the idea that, all right, this pain can't be everything. This loss, this grief, like this can't define. So you have to kind of take a different perspective, and that's kind of, I think, what those songs, for the most part, were about, like controlling the narrative, not letting the sense of loss or grief pull you into a place where you feel hopeless, right? Yeah.
And it's like the anti-samsara, the anti-yin and yang. There's it's basically just not allowing whatever eventuality or whatever duality there is, and just saying, okay, I'm choosing this path. That's it.
There's that line in Red Weather about pushing off from shore and abandoning all anchors or whatever, and that sense of folding out into the tide and trust, right? Trusting where you're going, trusting where even the pain is going to take you. And I think that's kind of the sentiment that we were trying to get at with the record.
Which is kind of funny because you think about it, that's a direct line to Fate's Got a Driver.
Actually it is. I never thought about it that way.
There are echoes of similar themes that maybe someone who doesn't study the written word as much as I have been since time immemorial. But I pick up these parallels, and they become very apparent to me only because I am a poet and a lyricist myself, and I'm such an avid appreciator of the written word. And when these happenstances take place, it catches my eye, catches my ear.
And
it's just like with all of the other parallels I've pointed out before in your lyricism. There are these ideas, these tropes of fate and faith, and really trusting where you're going to end up is where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Which is a very Eastern way of thinking if you really examine it. And it's actually quite beautiful because you're trusting that, you know, your karma or whatever you'd like to call it is intact enough that you're going to end up in the right place.
Right.
I say it's more than just, you know, plain as see. 'Cause you only got so much time here, then you're on to another place. Either you go down in the ground and sleep still in your grave, or you find yourself back home, back from where you came. About your time to die.
I've always had the sense that it's hard to explain, but that I've already arrived where I'm going. I failed to admit it to myself. Like, it's really hard to explain, but like, there's an inner knowledge, right? And an inner peace about where I will end up. But between this point in time and that point in time, till I get there, there's all this, you know, friction and confusion. But if I'm honest with myself, I think I know already, right? Like foreknowledge, I already know. But it's to your point, it's about trusting in that. Again, kicking off, letting go of the anchors and just getting into that flow and rhythm. I never thought about it in terms of the Eastern sort of thought and Eastern religion, but you're right. That vibes well with that whole concept for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, the second, not sorrowful mystery, that's Catholic. This, the Buddhist second, I forget their second law, but basically what it comes down to is life is suffering. Joyfully participate in the suffering. It sounds terrible, but it's actually a beautiful sentiment because you know, of course it's going to hurt.
Yeah, I think that sentence might wrap up in its entirety how I've written, right? Like I think that I haven't heard that, and but hearing you say that. I think it's kind of the aesthetic that I've always that's how I've always approached writing. Like exactly that, like, you know, it's suffering, but find something out of it, right? Make something out of it. Emerge from it. Yeah.
Because it's going to happen anyway. And I think that really is kind of the point.
Yeah.
Of you know, like, having children, getting married, loving other human beings. They're not divine beings, and for us to expect them to be is very unfair.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So you kind of have to understand that there's going to be friction. There's going to be problems. There's
disruptions. Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to cry. It's going to hurt.
Right.
That's what love is.
Yeah. And what do you make of that? Right.
And
what do you make?
And what do you make of it?
Yeah.
And that is ever present in your lyricism. I'm really thinking of it. That has been ever present. And I mean, how old were you guys when you started Split Lip? I mean, For the Love of the Wounded was...
I was the oldest. I would have been 19. So Adam would have been, no, I'd have been 18. Adam would have been 15. And then everything there between. Yeah.
You were born in what, 76?
73.
73. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, my math is poor right now. I keep forgetting what year that record came out. And even on that record, there's a very, very distinct sense of facing loss, facing angst, and it hones itself as it goes on, but it really is ever present in the lyricism. But I think what Red Weather does very differently, it's easily the most hopeful of the entire clutch of albums.
Oh, that's good to know. I like that.
It really is. It has it's not like you wrote depressing albums. That's not the case, but there's a hope to this one that when you've left off, it's palpable. It's very palpable. It's tactile. You can actually feel it listening to it.
That's great. I love that. Yeah.
And I think for men in our age group to still be creating music that can elicit that kind of emotional, tactile response, it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
That had to be evident in the making of this album.
Yeah, I think it was just, I think we've either been gifted with or cursed by the idea that we never had an agenda with a record, or I mean, it really, and I mean this, it was song by song, line by line. It just kind of metamorphosed into something that we were like, oh, there's a vibe here, there's a feel here. And that started early on. With the first record, I remember thinking there's like an identity to this record, whether it's good or bad or whatever. There's a through line. And each record did that for us, where it's like Fate's Got a Driver. You're like, oh, there's like something that feels a certain way and is sort of underpinning all these songs and tying them together, so good, bad, or, mediocre, whatever. Each of the albums, I think, had an identity. And I don't credit any of us for that. That was just probably where we were at and what we were feeling and what we wanted to express. But with each album, by the time we got to where we were formulating the artwork it was like, oh, there's like this, I don't know, there's synergy or this thing that binds all these disparate songs and thoughts together. And I think Red Weather is probably, for me, the best example of that. There's just a feel, right? There's a tone that keeps it sharply focused, I think, emotionally.
And, I think you accomplished that also with your solo record, and even with the Chevy Downs Band. I love that record. There's just something very, very razor sharp about Red Weather. I hope people kind of pick this up from what I'm trying to portray, but with all the other albums, like, they're all a journey and they all fit together. This one it picks up from an entirely different kind of perspective for me, because you're quite possibly writing from a more mature standpoint, maybe, but also there's a vantage point of like having known who all of these children were, being these other records. And you're looking at them all and you're apprising them and you love them all, but you realize I have to let them go.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's absolutely true. I think it's also in some of those earlier records, when you're younger, you're anticipating heartache or pain, right? If I think about it, I think about like For the Love, Bates Got a Driver, that's sort of, late teens, early 20s. You're anticipating life being volatile and chaotic. And, you're like, I'm ready for it. Let's go. I'm courting it. I want it.
Yeah.
And then Moon My Saddle was sort of, I actually experienced a bit of it, in real life as a, older adult. And then Red Weather is sort of, I think to your point, kind of synthesizing all of that, having gone through, a lot of different life experiences. And then some really big ones that I never could have imagined when I was younger and writing those earlier records, like really earth-shattering, challenging experiences, and then having to write your way out of those. And that might be where that, to your point, that sense of assessment of the past comes in with Red Weather.
You skipped over Exit 263? Is that like was that a subconscious thing, or like, because I have this deep reverence for that record, and I don't know, like it seems like people kind of didn't know it happened or forgot it happened or something. There's such an immediacy to that one that maybe hadn't really happened with you guys before. And I realized it was kind of like done in a cabin, was it not?
Yeah, it was. It was all done on pretty much a 4-track. And during a difficult time, I think to your point, I probably did skip over it subconsciously because it was a tough time for the band. We had a lot of voices in our heads, and we had a big LA manager, and we're kind of trying to feel our way, and lost a bit of identity, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those songs, I don't know, like any other recording, right? They're a snip at a time. They're where we were at that time in Southern Indiana, and we recorded them to a 4-track. They were sort of blueprints and sketches. They weren't anything that we thought were going to see the light of day, and we didn't have a whole lot of say over that. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's kind of where that comes from. We were not anticipating that to be out, but the great thing is a lot of people have really taken to it and enjoyed it. So,
well, because it's immediate, because it's, not overly done in any way, shape, or form. It's very
flawed in a lot of ways.
But that's what's great about it. I mean, you kind of have to, remembering where we both come from musically, there's like, Operation Ivy, we're not perfect in the studio. No. You know what I mean? Like Minor Threat, we're not perfect in the studio. Sick of It All, we're not perfect in the studio. There were flaws, and there was a lot of grit and flubs, and that's part of the beauty and charm and bravado of it. Right. Of course it's screwed up. It's punk, whatever. But I never really thought of that as like a flawed piece of music or a flawed document.
Yeah, well, I'm glad for that. I think there's a lot of songs on that record that could have, become something.
Well, Masterpiece was exactly what it said it was. That's a beautiful, flawless song.
Yeah, I love that song. I do. I really like that song. But it was a transition time for us. We were, considering trying to make it big and trying to, we had a lot of conflicting voices, I think. And even within the band, we had a lot of different ideas about where we were going to go and how we were going to get there. And, I mean, the reality of the situation is, if I, in looking back on it, the band was really the original 5 members, and I love the guys we played with in the interim, but, after Moon My Saddle, when we split up and looked for other band members, and that was kind of, I think, the beginning of sort of the desert years where we were just sort of not sure what our identity was. And it wasn't until the original 5 came back together that, it started to make sense again. So.
I think that is another linchpin to Red Weather, that reclaiming that original energy and allowing that force to sort of overtake you all. It's evident. Everything good about this record is evident, though. There's a special kind of I don't know. I don't even know how to put it. Like the German word is Sehnsucht. It's like longing for something that you didn't know you'd wanted.
Ah, interesting.
Like
love that.
I didn't know I needed this record, and then it happened.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's sort of what I call from it. But we've been talking for quite a while, and I completely skipped over my format, which is I always ask the same question of every artist first. And I guess I'll put it here because I'd forgotten this entire time, because we kind of hit the ground running, which is beautiful.
We did.
But what is it that you are terrified of in an existential manner?
Wow.
Yeah, that's usually my conversation starter. You could see how that can spark conversation, but we don't have that problem right now.
Shit. Well, we've been going deep the whole time, so I'm just deep. I think what I would be most afraid of and terrified, mortified of in an existential manner would be any degree of shame on the part of my children in their thoughts of me as a dad. That would be my biggest terror.
That's the first time I've gotten that, and I can completely agree with that.
Yeah. And I will just say, I'm confident that would not be the case, but
right.
That would be my biggest terror and sense of failure in life. If God forbid, because I have friends and acquaintances who have fractured relationships with their children, and that's something I can't quite fathom.
Yeah, I don't know if I could. That's a difficult one to live with.
Yeah.
Because unless you are a person that doesn't have children, which I have quite a lot of friends that are childless in their 50s and they're completely fine with it. But once you have, gazed into what is essentially the eyes of the infinite, which is your child comes out and you hold them for the first time and you look and you're like, okay, this is my life now.
Yeah.
This is what I care about. Everything else before this is kind of bullshit. This is it.
Yeah.
To let that creature down, to be thought of poorly by that creature.
Yeah.
Not a good feeling.
No, I can't. Yeah. It's almost too hard to wrap my mind around.
Yeah.
There's a line, in Calling Our Cars, you mentioned where, they're when the boys you raise will come and demand answers. And
yeah,
it's something I've wrestled with where, like, when your children get to the point where they're old enough to look you in the eyes and go, all right, well, explain, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's powerful, but it's also daunting. It's like, man. And, I have a lot of great, long, philosophical conversations with my kids. For me, that's my religion with them. It's just conversation and talking and, digging into everything. But, there comes a time in any parent's life where you gotta stand up and take stock of who you've been. And they're going to come asking, like, how'd you get here? What's your guiding principle? Like, what,
yeah,
which is cool, but it's also very daunting in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I have, when I heard that line, my father, I don't remember asking him this question, but I was about 5 years old, I think he told me. We have a family cabin that rests deep in the mountains of Pennsylvania, and we share this property with a farmer who has steer. And all along the roads of the property, these cows are behind barbed wire. And I was looking at the cows and looking at my father, looking at the cows, looking at my father, and I said, Dad, what if they think we're the ones who are fenced in? And
Oh my God.
I blew his mind. And that's what it reminded me of, like kind of reckoning.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite the way you had written it, but certainly the way I'd felt it.
Yeah. That reminds me so much of a moment I had with my daughter when she was probably 4 years old, 3, 4. I was giving her a bath, and same sort of scenario, right? She goes, Dad, if God made the world, then who made God? And I said, wow, Maggie, that's an amazing question. And I don't know that I have the answer, but what do you think? She gave me this face. She's sitting in the bathtub. She's like, oh, I just tooted. But it was like this moment of like great depth. And then immediately she was a child again. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But it's same sort of thing where it was like, my mind was blown. Like, wow, you're like plumbing the depths of, the very central basic questions of existence. And then all of a sudden, like, nah,
I pass gas. But anyway, chicken or egg, Dad, which is it?
Yeah, exactly. I remind her of that all the time. She gets so mad.
Well, I mean, she should only take it as a testament to her depth as a thinker,
Yeah. And then lack of depth.
Well, listen, we're all guilty of what she did there after the query,
It's always been one of my favorite stories.
So Red Weather is in the can. It's behind you. You guys have been playing on it. What is in the cards next for you? I've always been waiting for the book of poetry, and I still haven't gotten it. But that's just,
wow,
that's on my wish list.
I love that. I'm actually I'm getting my master's right now in creative writing and poetry. So that's probably my next chapter. As far as a band thing, we had a few conversations this last tour when we were out. And I'm not saying, I don't know where things will go. I will say there was something about this record and about this whole last several years that felt like a bit of an end cap on, where we've been and what we've done. Now there have been plenty of times where we've thought that in the past, for sure.
Mm.
And then there's been a resurgence or some, one song or, somebody will send somebody something and we'll all be all hands on deck again. But put it this way, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't play another show or record another song, and I won't be surprised if we play another show and record another song. So I mean, yeah,
we did kind of, get Raise It High out of nowhere for in as many years, you know what I mean? So like
it's just like, it's always this thing where I'm like, and I'm sure the other four are the same way. It's like, man. And then somebody will write something or send something and then, it's just, everybody does an about face and is ready to go. So I would never say that it wouldn't happen, but there is something about Red Weather that feels complete to me and fulfilled. but we'll see. We certainly don't have any plans to do anything else. But
I mean, I could easily see another solo record.
Well, that's interesting you said that too, because I have been talking to, actually you mentioned Chevy Downs, so Tim Jones and I, who was in Old Pike, and we've been we've been friends for a long time, and I've been sending him some stuff, and I would like to do another solo record. It'd be very different, but I've got probably 15, 16 songs that might make it out sometime. We'll see. So who knows, that's a great thing about at this point in life. There's been so many other phases where I've been like, this is over, that's done. This is, you compartmentalize everything. And now I'm a dad, so I can't do this. Now, when you get to this point, it's like, you can do whatever, like, especially now more than ever, we can send each other songs. We can record and write across, long distances. So we'll see.
It's amazing that you're going back for your master's, because I've been chipping away at that myself for the past like 3 years.
Yeah.
I always felt pretty terrible about myself that I only had my BA in lit, and I started sooner or later I was going to get it. Yeah. But I started chipping away at it a few years ago, and it's taken way longer than it should have. But, we have jobs, we have kids.
Yeah. All in due time. The only reason I went back is because with the pandemic and everything, I'd been with a company for 20 years and that fell apart. And I was like, well, this is a perfect time. So I'm just going to go do it. And ideally, want to teach and then write in the summertime, and we'll see. But sky's the limit. We can do whatever we want, right?
Absolutely. At this point, it seems like it'd be pointless not to.
Yeah.
I personally can't see myself being the most verbose plumber in my department for no damn good reason.
Yeah.
It's like I have to ply my trade, my actual trade, at some point in my lifetime. May as well be now.
Yeah.
But,
well, there's this beautiful thing that happens as you get older, right? There's this whittling down of like, it's almost like my first love, which was writing and, poetry and literature, to your point. And then life gets more complicated, more textured, more nuanced. You get outside of that. And then there's a settling back into your first arrival and your first sort of sense of identity. You kind of come back to that if you're lucky enough to reconnect with it. But I think it stays with you all along, right? But you just get back to it, and then you realize you haven't journeyed that far from your early 20s to your midlife. And that thing you loved first has been with you the whole time, It's just about reconciling with it and reconnecting with it.
Change a thing if the days were ever changing. I've learned enough from living. Cause I'm the one who reaches for loneliness. Can you come down to me? I'll be waiting with that same look on my face. And I'm still stuck inside of sorrow. Though the days outside are fleets, and I'm still combing out for stars behind the weakest window pane. Cause I'm the one who reaches for loneliness. Can you come down to me? And now the days stretch out like the landscape of the sky. When the seasons change, stop me waiting, that same look on my face. If I could dig my way out, I would. I've been sailing paper ships under burning bridges since the beginning, and I wouldn't change a thing if the days were never changing. I've learned enough from living, and they'll probably say of me, here was one who came just to live, just to live.
Allowing yourself to remain in love with the same thing too. I mean, there's that part of, I think, all of us where we tend to look down our noses at the things we prized as younger people.
Yeah.
And the older we get, the more we realize, like, you know, it doesn't have to be this grandiose like concept. It's just like, yeah, I loved writing.
Yeah.
It's time to get back to that. And that's the end of it.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. And I think that's, you know, if only we could know that when we're young, like, hey, it's not some big deal. Just, you're good at it. It's what brings you energy in life. So just do that.
Yeah.
Right?
But I think if we had known that then, we would have more than likely screwed it up anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Which is the point of youth, my friend.
Yeah.
So I could probably talk to you all night like this, but we both have families.
Yeah.
What would you like to leave us with tonight, Dave?
You know what? All I want to do is extend my gratitude. I think, you know, exceptionally easy to talk to you. Thank you for your insights and thoughts, and you've made some things evident to me that I didn't even, you know, think about or realize. So I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody who's listened to any of the records, and particularly those folks who have listened to all of them, evolved along with us. So thank you for even caring enough to have me on and give me a voice on your podcast. I appreciate that.
Listen, I appreciate you coming on, because without Chamberlain's in my top like 3 favorite bands of all time. And, you know, this new kind of renaissance with Red Weather and the 25-year anniversary of Fate's Got a Driver and the tribute album that's out on Bandcamp. I mean, you're getting your due again. And bands like Gaslight Anthem and Hot Water, even like Fall Out Boy sing the praises and have this adoration for Split Lip and Chamberlain. If people don't know by now how absolutely integral you guys are to the music that is currently happening, they're either blind or deaf or don't choose to hear it. But your lyrics and your music have meant the world to me since I was a kid, when, you know, the first Split Lip record, the first 7-inch came out with the fanzine, and I bought it, and it's carried me through life, and I really appreciate you, my friend.
Well, I can't tell you how much that means. Like, it's not lost on me. And I know what records have done for me, and, you know, times of absolute darkness, times of absolute light. And for you to say that about our music means a hell of a lot. So I appreciate that, my brother.
All right, my man.
All right.
On that note, I will leave you for the evening and hope to talk to you again someday.
Thank you, brother. Take care. All right.
You too.
All right. God bless.
God bless you. How do I explain the love, jubilation, and wonderment that David Moore and Chamberlain have imbued into my life? It's difficult to alliterate, but I can tell you with a great amount of certainty that I wouldn't be the person I am today had it not been for this band, for this music, for these lyrics, and for this life experience that's been translated through the written word and the melody and canon that is Chamberlain's back catalog. Mr. David Moore is nothing if not a consummate gentleman, a heartfelt intellectual, a true poet, and a real human being. As I'd said in the body of this interview, David and I have had many conversations throughout the years, at least 4 that I could think of off the top of my head. And every single time has been transformative, lovely, and awe-inspiring. This gentleman and his work have meant the world to me since I was a teenager. I don't know how to put that in any other way except for that. I'm honored, humbled, and I'm beholden to him for having taken the time, the care, and the reverence to sit with me, entertain my questions, and just be one hell of a stand-up human being. And for that, David Moore, I love you and I thank you. All of that being said, we're that much closer to the end of Season 1, my friends. I've gotten to speak to so many of my all-time favorites. Lycia, Neurosis, Chris Broach from Braid. The list goes on and on. I'm humbled by the opportunities that have been afforded to me. So, from 3:33 a.m. studios, folks, this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. He's been David Moore. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. Embrace the person you love most and lie close to them tonight, because you may not have another chance tomorrow. I love you all. Good night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in with us once again tonight. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, and just show us a little love because we appreciate it. I'll see you all again next week, and thank you so much. Good night, everyone.